Coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast, we are just a few weeks away from the NBA draft, and it seems like nobody knows what the Hornets are going to do. Does that excite you? Does that scare you? I've got David Walker here. I will ask him that question coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
Welcome in. This is the Locked On Hornets podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time! Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and daily wherever you get podcasts, and that includes YouTube, where you can see the bright, shining, wonderful face of David Walker, my guest today. He's been guest hosting all week this week as we await Walker Mail's return from a vacation. When Walker gets back, you can catch him on WFNZ, where you can also listen to Hornets games and listen to Wes and Walker 12 to 3. And you can catch David on Twitter at David B. Walker. I'm Doug Branson. You can catch my work on Every Hornets Boxscore.com. And I just want to say that a plague has been set upon my house. We've got the toddler plague that is just ripping through this house right now. So this might be it for me this week. Hopefully I'm back next week.
Oh.
This might be
okay. Just no more shows, you mean?
Yeah.
You're just going to throw
I don't
in the
know.
towel.
I don't know at this point. So what I thought we would do, David, as we hop into the show, is really just a smorgasbord of Hornets headlines, Hornets blurbs, Hornets mock drafts, and then the folks really delivered on the Satchel. So I want to get to some of these Satchel questions. Got a silly one later in the show. I've been asking for silly ones. I want you to get sillier. This one came on the subtext line. You can hit that up at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Hornets. We'll start with this question here to lead our discussion from the Sicko Satchel. Our sickos, the people that have the most hope that the Hornets are going to turn this thing around. And one of them is Noah. Noah says, is there anyone in this draft that you would consider trading up for? Because, David, we've talked a lot about trading back in this draft, trading back into the first round, trading the pick altogether. We haven't really talked about trading up at all. So Noah wants to know about trading up. He says, I haven't given up on the Ricochet fit for this team and feel like the Spurs would be open to a trade if given the right incentive. So the Spurs at 4, Ricochet being mocked. I mean, I saw in one of the latest big drafts, Ricochet was mocked number 1. So I think they would have to do some significant trading up if they wanted to get Ricochet there. But what are your thoughts on trading up? Is there anyone that entices you enough? Stephon Castle, Klingon, Holland, Reed Shepherd, anyone that entices you enough to say Hornets trade up to 4, 3, and go get that guy?
No, not really, Doug. I mean, honestly, there's just so much. Now, look, there will be a star, there will be a player, there will be someone who pops out of this draft. I don't think anybody has figured that out. I don't think anybody has ID'd that guy or knows exactly who that might be. So with so much uncertainty, I just don't see the upside in trading up right now. Like 5 years down the road, we'll look back and maybe someone that drafted ahead of them will pop as that guy and say, hey, you should have made a move or something. But like, no one knows. No one knows anything about this draft. It feels like teams are really they're even struggling to figure out like who to take first, who to take second. You know what I mean? Yep. So like with so much movement and so many people looking to trade, I don't think there's going to be much value in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the Rockets, you ID that Rockets pick at number 3 because it seems like they want to get out of that pick. So, if there was a player, because it looks like more and more that Sarr and Ricochet are locked at 1-2. So if you really wanted to have your pick of the litter at that point, if you did identify a player you wanted, then there is that spot there to move up to. But it would cost you, even in a weak draft, moving up into that top 3 is going to come at a significant cost. And I think the only reason you do that is if your player development people, your scouts are confident that a player is going to become a star. And when you look at the comps for these players, whether it's Shepherd or Castle or Klingon or Holland or any of these guys, the comps are wild, man. It's like, low-end guy who barely made it out of the G League, and high-end, might be a star. Or sometimes, for a guy like Dalton Connect, it's high-end Bogdanovich, low-ends, Harris or something like Joe Harris.
Right.
So I don't think that there's that player. Or you trade up because you think there's a guy who can fill an immediate need. And again, with the Hornets, with having Brandon Miller maybe be a 2, maybe be a 3, you've got LaMelo locked in at point guard. You're going to make it run at Bridges, and he can play 3-4. Mark Williams locked in at 5. There's not an immediate positional need. There's a lot of depth that they have to address, and they need star power. Not going to really find it in this draft. For all those reasons, I'm kind of with you, David. It doesn't make a lot of sense to move up.
Well, and plus, we have no idea where this team is on identifying prospects. Their coach is about to coach at game 1 of the finals tonight. You know what I mean? So
good luck, Charles.
Yes. Good luck. Good luck to you. Obviously, people are doing work, right? There's some level of investigation going on, but we have no idea. So for me, even I've kind of settled in on I'd be fine with Castle, Klingon, even a Shepard, a Ron Holland. And so if you think about it from that angle, someone's going to fall to you.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
I mean, and we're not even talking about traditional fall. We're talking about we'd be okay with this handful of guys. You could even probably fill it out to 5. And so someone's going to be there for you to get. There's no reason for you to jump up and risk something else to try and take, another one of those guys.
It's such a beautiful point that it's not going to be like taking a falling star, which I hate. Because
you hate it.
I've seen Reed at 3. I've seen Reed at 7. I've seen Connect mocked at 6. And in fact, Sam Vecini, that's the pick he has for the Charlotte Hornets in his latest draft for the Athletic. And you mentioned not knowing where the Hornets really are. And so in that mock draft that Sam Vecini did, he writes this: the Hornets pick is seen as an inflection point, as teams around the league are unclear on the direction new head of basketball operations Jeff Peterson will take. Peterson was an assistant general manager in Brooklyn and Atlanta during times when his teams made varied picks. So the question that I teased in the cold open, David, look, during this time, shadow games are the game. It's all about not letting people know exactly where your head is or that's normal. But I would say the level of mystery around what the Hornets as an organization want to do, where they want to go, are they rebuilding, are they retooling, when do they want to compete, what do they think they need in terms of talent upgrades? All of that, I would say, huge question mark. And that started before Peterson was hired. That started when we first 100%. Heard from the owners. All of this talk has been very vague and almost salesy is a word that I would use, but not selling us on a vision, but just selling us on a hold on, everyone, we're working on it. Does that excite you? Does that scare you? Do you take this idea that look, we don't even know who they're working out at this point? Do you take any of that, and what does that do for you?
Yeah, one other thing on that: no one pays attention to the Hornets. We know that, so no one is. It's going to be hard to get any intel. No one pays attention to the Hornets until something actually happens with the Hornets and they dive in and try and figure a few things out. But along the way, no one's really gauging what this team is doing. But I'm excited. There's no choice but to be excited for the unknown, because there's a possibility that there could be a radical shift in how things are approached, what they're doing, how they want to market themselves, the vision they want to take, what's Charles Lee going to bring to the table. So you have to. This is the biggest thing about the Hornets fans and the Sickos in particular. The bounce back, the ability to bounce back, and at each offseason, round ourselves back into shape of, hey, it could happen this year. And now this is as likely as it's ever been, because there's a new regime. So you have to be excited.
I really hope that they're just waiting on Charles Lee. That all of that we're waiting on Charles Lee to get installed, and then everybody kind of gets together and says, okay, this is the vision for the franchise. Because otherwise, look, I've said this a couple of times now, but I know people tune into different shows during the week. But when you don't have a narrative for your franchise, people are going to create it for you. And when you look, if you don't tell us your plan and the plan works, we'll all go, well,
right.
You're a genius. If you don't tell us a plan and the plan doesn't work, there's not going to be any, well, they had, because we said this about regimes of the past, during that 2015-16 run, we were like, look, they had an idea, they tried to work it, it didn't work out for them. There's a little bit of an element of giving them a break on some things because you had a plan, you try to execute it best
right.
you can, sometimes things don't work out. But if you don't tell us the plan and then it doesn't, then all we're going to judge you on is wins and losses. So that just is what it is. So I don't know that it excites me. It scares me a little bit. I would love for this franchise to come out and say, like, all right, here's sort of the vision. Maybe they're waiting on Charles Lee.
Well, yeah. And so last thing on that, if you're a Hornets fan, you're hoping for a sweep. You want this thing over in 4 games.
That's right.
Because you want Charles
either way.
First.
Don't care. I don't care if Charles Lee takes on the Heart. Sorry, Charles. I don't care if you take the
No,
home to Hartwell. Either way, 4-0. Let's go.
But if it's a Celtics win, you want Charles Lee on the first thing, smoking out of Boston or Dallas or whatever, to be here in Charlotte. Ride those coattails, baby. Ride that championship coattail all the way to the first press conference here in Charlotte and let him then tell you his vision. I mean, he seems like a smart guy. He's got to be thinking a little bit, during the day about Charlotte. So that's what I would do. We want to sweep, and we want Charles Lee the very next morning with, champagne, his goggles. Maybe he still has his goggles around his neck, but we want him talking to the Hornets faithful.
All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
David, you mentioned that no one really pays attention to the Hornets, and there were some reports that they were having difficulty getting prospects to pay attention to the Hornets or come work out for the Hornets. We got a little bit of color around that courtesy of the Low Post podcast, so I want to get your thoughts on that. Plus, we have a lot from the Sicko Satchel. That's all ahead today on the Locked On Hornets podcast. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. So if you're thinking about making the trip to Dallas or Boston, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And look, last-minute deals, you can get some of those. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, all one word, smush it together, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Okay, David, I promised a smorgasbord, and I'm going to give you a couple of choices here, okay? You can either get the Low Post podcast giving us a few more details on the Hornets prospect workout situation. I've got LaMelo riding a go-kart on top of a building.
Yes.
I've got Vasa Micic interviewed by Hoops Hype. Which one would you like first? We're getting into all of these. I'm just telling you right now, buckle in. We're getting to all of these topics.
Yeah, just real quick. If Walker, I know Walker's on vacation. I hope he's chilling, maxing, relaxing.
Let me just say this. Let me stop you there. Stop you there. Because we have a group chat, and you and I, between you, me, and Walker, and we have been you and I have been group chatting it up. Have not heard a single word from Walker. We've been talking about
it's unplugged. It's unplugged.
he is in some remote location. I hope he's still alive. I hope that you're going to see. I hope I'm still alive next week. There might not be a show. It might be you and Nada next week. I'm just going to warn folks.
Hey, Nada, call me, bro. Hey, if Walker sees a screen grab of this episode, he's not gonna recognize these two smiling faces. He's gonna think it's Locked On Finance Bros.
Oh, it's true.
So I look forward to him coming back. So let's go Low Post.
Okay, Low Post, recent episode, and basically it was revealed that there's have been some scheduling issues with how late the process has gotten started this year. And so it's not necessarily that the Hornets are being rejected by prospects. It's just not that It's just that they're not the first destination. And as we've revealed on the podcast, the Hornets are not going to be as open as they have been in the past with exactly who they're working out. So in talking about the Hornets draft situation at 6, it was revealed on the Low Post podcast that they will most likely get at least some of the names that are projected to them at 6 to come in and get a look at them. It's just we're not going to kind of know either way whether that's going to happen or not. So that's a relief, right, David?
Yeah. If you want to know why Hornets fans are so sensitive, it's because of stuff like this. Because for a week and a half, it was like, oh my God, no one wants to work out for the Hornets. The UConn guys are talking trash about the Hornets. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's going to come in. Nobody wants to be here. No one wants to be here. And all it takes is, I mean, how long did they talk about the Hornets on the low? Was it like a minute and 20 seconds?
It was at the very end of the episode. I think we got a couple of minutes.
Either skipping ahead. Yeah, skipping it. We're going to talk about the Hornets now. Click. So most people, again, are not paying attention. This is but it does feel good to know that, listen, guys, they're going to get people to work out for their draft picks. Don't worry. So thanks to Zach Lowe.
Well, they also talked about LaMelo Ball, and Zach Lowe in particular had some glowing words for Ball and some hope that that situation would rectify itself if LaMelo Ball can stay healthy. And there's this interesting thing on LaMelo Ball, too, from Jeremy Wu on his latest mock draft, which we haven't talked about yet. Wu writes, the Hornets are sitting in a tricky spot at number 6 with some prospects unwilling to work out in Charlotte. Again, we just talked about that may be a little bit of too soon talk there.
Wu.
Come on, Wu. He also writes, with a new front office in place and the team's new ownership also known to be heavily involved in decision-making, it remains to be seen what direction the franchise will take. And there is much curiosity around the league surrounding LaMelo Ball's long-term fits.
Ooh.
And now in this draft, in this mock draft, he has Dillingham going to the Hornets at 6. Shooting ability, playmaking, essentially not being the Hornets. The idea here being that the Hornets might not want to be afraid of taking a point guard if there are some questions about LaMelo Ball's long-term fit, either from LaMelo Ball or from the organization, and understanding the injury and the contract situation. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's not something I really get fit, with LaMelo. That's never really been – it's always a talking point when you're talking about adding stuff. Last year it was the Scoot fit. It's always can he play with a smaller guard, which he's done forever. Like I said earlier in the week, LaMelo is going to make whomever he plays with fit in my eyes. Like I think he's unselfish enough, and he wants to make other people look good enough, and at the same time get his. Like fit is not a concern for me with LaMelo. If you're just talking about playing, like obviously success has not come. So if you're talking about it from that standpoint, nothing's been fitting lately. So that is, I guess a puzzle piece they have to figure out. How are they going to unlock LaMelo so that it benefits everyone? So if Wu's coming at it from that standpoint, or if there is interest around the league from that standpoint, I guess I get it. But like just from a straight fit play on court thing, like I'm confident LaMelo can basically play with anyone. They just got to figure it out.
Well, and currently on the roster, they do have some point guard depth, and that does include Vasa Micic, the former EuroLeague MVP who was a member of OKC. He's a much older rookie because it took a long time for him to get over from Europe to the NBA, but he finally got a shot with OKC but didn't really get a fair shot, was traded to the Hornets, and got his fairest shot because of LaMelo's injury that he's had. But also, I'm sure Micic knows LaMelo's coming back. What does that mean for me? And he was interviewed by Hoops Hype, and you sent this interview to me, and I was kind of scrolling through the interview, sort of looking for, this is what I do. You send me something, or anyone sends me something, and I'm looking for the Hornets angle. This is Locked On Hornets. I saw a lot of talk about his time in OKC. I didn't see really anything about him talking about his thoughts on the Hornets, his future with the Hornets, and you pair this, and I'll link it in the show notes so you can go read it for yourself. But you kind of pair this with some of the in-team media interviews that Micic would do, these sort of walk-in talks that they would do from the locker room. And Micic has always been a bit like, I'm not sure where Charlotte is on the map. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I don't know what my role is here. Like, what are your, I threw a lot at you there, but kind of give me your thoughts on, It doesn't seem like Micic is long for this Hornets world. Am I kind of where do you think I am on that take?
Yeah, he was prompted several times, and like to be fair, this is a it's an interview, right? So like the questions are thrown out there, and then he transcribes the answers. But like he's prompted a couple times with Charlotte. The interviewer, I'm sorry, I can't remember who.
I don't think it was Scotto. I'll get the
no. And he's like he mentioned Charlotte in the question. And Micic, I mean, almost goes out of his way to just not even refer to Charlotte at all. He does, heap glowing praise on OKC, which is all due. You know what I mean? It makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it didn't sound like his time in Charlotte was one of, great growth or enjoyment for that factor. And like, again, so when Hornets fans get labeled with sensitive, I was right there with him in this. I was reading this thinking about the other players, not the ones that are on the team, but the ones that have left the team recently that have had, not so great things to say about the Hornets organization. And I'm just like, this goes in that bucket, man. I don't know. It doesn't sound like, it doesn't sound like he's long for this place, which is a little, he was a nice surprise. He was a great surprise for the Hornets on the floor. And like someone who I was hoping, and then they maybe still do that, keep him around. You know what I mean?
Micic seems like a guy that wants a shot at being the guy. And he doesn't care whether he plays for a winner or not. So, I mean, I think there are some trade opportunities to send him to a team that desperately needs a point guard, and the Hornets could gather assets. I think that would be probably the best thing for the Hornets and the best thing for him. Because
San Antonio, can we call you?
I mean, call us. I mean, Micic is a hot prospect. The funniest thing from this interview was, and the thing that is getting quoted the most on Hoops Hype, is they asked him, "What's the biggest thing you're trying to improve heading into your second NBA season?" And Micic says, "I'm not so into these percentages."
Yeah, not a big numbers guy.
No, honestly, I think the game is a very spontaneous thing, but maybe spot up threes and being more efficient in that part. Of course, defense is something that every white guy has to do because we are always targeted on defense. But I like to be myself at best, and then if it's enough, it's enough. I'm not the worst for sure. Yeah, so the headline here is defense is something that every white guy has to do because we are targeted always in defense. Maybe that's I don't know, because you mentioned like this interview probably had to go through somewhat of maybe a translator or something a little bit. I don't know, or maybe the English is not so good. I don't know. It's an interesting quote.
The headline should be, "I'm definitely not the worst." You know what I mean? That should be the pull quote. I think his agency should pull that out and just send it around. "I'm definitely not the worst."
All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
LaMelo was riding a go-kart on top of a building. I'll ask David what he wants to do with that. That's really all I got on that. Plus, we've Sicko Satchel. I promised it. We've got a couple of very interesting Sicko Satchel questions. And one of them involves a little bit of a dad chat, which is why I'm glad I have David here. There's a baby involved. So stick around. That's all I had on the Locked On Hornets podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. With more than 5 million members, it is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you're watching your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections, and you are locked in here on Locked On Hornets. If you are looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stats projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. There's always action on Prize Picks, and this is the perfect time to try out something new. As basketball is starting to wind down, make sure you try out esports this month, because for every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you are going to get your entry fee back. Choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and more. It's all on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA, all one word, smush it together, LOCKEDONNBA, for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks, check it out. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Okay, David, back here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. I've got 2 Sicko Satchel questions for you, but first, there was footage of LaMelo riding a go-kart on top of a building. Apparently, this is his condo building. He just bought a new condo. He's riding a go-kart. Your thoughts?
Yes. I'm just glad to see him, man. I'm glad he's in the city. I believe the go-kart was neon yellow.
I'm
right?
glad he's
so
on top of the city. I'm glad he's doing it.
Well,
he's
Doug,
not on the streets of the city. He's on top of the city.
Listen, this morning, downtown Charlotte on Church and 6th, there's a front of a car sticking out. Vin Diesel, Fast and Furious style. Someone went too far. It's sticking out of the side of the deck. So it's mayhem. It's mass hysteria on the rooftops of downtown Charlotte. So as long as that go-kart stays, up there. Well, my question is that like a common area? Is that LaMelo's area? You know what I mean? Is this like a place where people can go up and do some grilling? Does he just have free reign of that? That's what I want to know. But he wasn't going too fast. Maybe this is his new mode of transportation. Everybody's on him about pulling out of the parking deck too fast. You go to the go-kart, you won't have that problem.
Well, it could be his thing. Cam had the scooter.
That's right.
This
is Cam's. I believe this is Cam's old unit he bought. So, superstars in Charlotte.
There have to be more places. It seems like we're always talking about
there's only one.
Incestuous real estate purchases. Remember that, like Clifford.
Michael Jordan.
There's that. But then Clifford. Yeah. When he came back for his second run, apparently took Mitch's place for a little bit. How many?
Right.
Charlotte has a lot of real estate. It's a hot real estate market. I don't know why we keep taking each other's places. I guess references mean something when you're talking about that high dollar of a purchase. Okay. enough go-kart talk. Although I will say, if you have enough money in America, any place can be your place. I think that's the lesson here. I don't know if it's a good lesson, but it is the lesson. It is kind of reality. All right, Ian, he got in on the subtext line here. Ian has a question for the Sicko Satchel, and it is this. As of this past weekend, I officially also have a baby. Congratulations, Ian.
All right, Ian.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the dad chat. Welcome to hell. It's a beautiful hell, but sometimes it is hell. Sometimes you get a plague, a pox upon your entire house. Look forward to that. All right, Ian continues. Just like this team can't get top free agents, we aren't getting many new fans, so we decided to add a new one via the draft, a.k.a. birth.
That's it. Organic.
It's all, organic growth, exactly. The most organic growth you can possibly have. I'm planning on taking her to games. What's the youngest age you or David have taken your children to a Hornets game? David?
Oh, that's a great question. I think my youngest went around age, I'm going to say 5.
Wow. That's pretty
I
late in the game.
Dude, let me tell you something. Yeah. Now, a Hornets game in particular we're talking about, I did take my oldest to a football game. Around 2 or 3, and that was a horrible mistake. So that's why we waited so late.
Why was it a horrible mistake? What happened?
Just running around, mass hysteria, never sitting still. A lot of stuff going on that you would expect from a child. But for some reason, I had in my head that I would also be able to watch the game. You're not watching the game. You get your new baby there. So that's for me. I know you've probably gone younger than that, though, Doug. Taking yours.
Yeah. My kiddo went to her first game at 2 years old. But here's my advice to Ian. You have to gauge this stuff out. Like, what kind of kid do you have? Because I think there are kids that are bouncing all over the place. My kid has not generally shown that. And when you put her in big crowd situations, so this would be my advice. Take the kid as the kid grows to different kind of events, parades, sort of lower stakes things, and gauge what kind of kid do you have growing? Is it a kid that constantly, you've got to keep tabs on, or do they look at when you get into big crowds, do they look at everything with wonder and excitement? That's sort of how my kid is. You put her in those situations, and she kind of not clams up, but just sort of just taking it all in, and so wasn't bouncing around. Right. But you have to be fully prepared, as David was saying. You have to be fully prepared to A, not watch the game, B, leave the game at any moment. That's what we were prepared for. The
Yes.
other piece of advice that I would have for Ian is definitely ear protection of some kind. Like I don't think people take it in how loud these arenas and stadiums truly are. And so definitely get some ear protection on the kiddo, especially if they have any kind of like sensitivity to sound or, kind of gauge that too. You don't want to put yourself in that weird situation. The thing I've seen people, I went to a soccer game here in Nashville and I saw people bringing like almost babies to these games. And that's crazy to me. I mean,
I know.
That's insanity to me. I think 2 years old is probably like the starting point.
That's where you want to start. And I will piggyback on your first point there. Preseason games are ideal because it's a little less fervor. You can leave whenever you want, so that's a good place to start if you're going to do that. Another one, now this takes 2 kids, so you got to step up. But for my son's birthday, we have 4 tickets to the Hornets games.
Okay.
2 are down low. Okay. 2 are up top.
Okay.
The oldest, the oldest, yes, right. The oldest and I were down low. My wife was with the younger one who does not have a love of sport. He has not contracted it yet. So as we were having a great time down low, I could also peek back up, and see her pulling her hair out and freaking out. Now, that's a bit of a man-to-man defense, and you got to separate it up. But if you want to pull that move, go 2 and 2 and try and set up, separate it.
But what David is saying here is you have to game plan. You have to strategize. You have to scout your kids. You have to scout your kids and find out, like, what kind of kid are we dealing with here? And let's make a night, whether it's going to a Hornets game or whether it's going out to dinner or whatever you do, you have to think about it. I think a lot of – and look, there are situations where the kid just goes nuts and there's nothing you can do about it. But I think a lot of situations where kids are going crazy or not doing what the parents want them to do in these public situations, a lot of it comes down to just like – because this has happened to me. You just go, oh, yeah, everybody get up, go to dinner. And you're not thinking like, how's the kid feeling? How are you feeling? Are you feeling patient enough to deal with this situation right now? And so you've got to scout. You've got to game plan. I love what David, what you're throwing out there. And also, I guess look at the schedule. Maybe pick a game against a high quality opponent for the Hornets next season, where maybe the third and fourth quarter won't matter as much. maybe one of those games. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so a lot of good advice there. Keep your dad chat questions coming, especially to the Satchel, because David is on every week, and we can talk about those. One more Satchel question to go. This also comes from subtext, and I don't get names on there often, so you know who you are if you ask this question. If the Hornets players had to form a band, who would take on which role? Lead singer, drummer, guitarist, etc., and what would be their debut singles title and genre? David, I gave you a chance to think about this. Did you come up with something for the Hornets band?
I did. 90s R&B would be the genre. So I'm taking a little bit.
Boys to Men, which is kind of what we're hoping for here, player development, right? We want some boys to men.
Right. So some sort of that. So not as much on the instrumental side. But I would have Micic on the stand-up bass. You know what I mean? Like up here, right? So Micic would be on the stand-up bass. I'm going Mark Williams with a cane. Now maybe not with a cane, but just like for prop. Remember how you'd have a cane, the deep bass guy would just come in and drop a deep bass line every once in a while.
Sure.
Lead singer, I gotta go. Now this is not. Let's don't take offense. Lead singer, I gotta go. Lead vocals, Brandon Miller.
Oh,
Brandon Miller is my lead
That's
vocals.
a statement. That's a statement. It's not LaMelo Ball. It's Brandon Miller.
Because LaMelo is the guy that just comes in at the on the chorus on the bridge and does a solo and just goes and puts some dance moves in. And then drops, the high vocalist. So that's my 4-man 90s R&B, decked out in long jean shorts, combat boots, what have you. But yeah, I think that's what the lead single, I guess, would be. I'll make bug to you, something like that. You know what I mean?
Down on Brandon
Knee. They can make that work.
Down on Brandon Knee. What do you think?
Now we're talking. Bam.
But one of my first album purchases ever was, I think, the second Boyz II Men album. Okay, so I went in a similar direction where I'm like parodying an act, but I didn't go 90s R&B. I went back to one of my favorite bands, the Beatles. Loved the Beatles growing up. And I just loved their evolution as a band. And so I think the Hornets are a lot like the Beatles in that you have two guys in LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, much like Lennon and McCartney, you're not sure who to ascribe what song to yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, who is the leader of this band? Is it Lennon? Is it McCartney? Now, that famously did not work out. We're hoping, I think, that it works out a little bit better as LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller figure out the leadership situation. But I think you've got a Lennon-McCartney situation developing with LaMelo and Brandon. So those are my sort of lead singers, lead instrumentalists. And then I think I'm going to put in the George Harrison role. So George Harrison is somebody that is generally regarded as having some of the great Beatles songs. He either had a great Beatles song or he was just sort of invisible. And so I feel like I want to put Miles Bridges into that role a little bit, like efficiency-wise, where he's not the most efficient player, but there are moments where he can put up 40 and he can dominate a game. And that, to me, is totally George Harrison. And then finally, you've got Ringo, the drummer, who doesn't get enough credit, who we're not sure exactly what he does here sometimes. Could somebody come in and maybe fill his role in a way that's a bit more dynamic, is a bit more, but look, you've got a solid drummer in Ringo. That's going to be Mark Williams at the center position. Mark Williams is right now has proven in the limited time that we've seen him to be a solid defensive stopper, but there's room to expand that game, and is probably underappreciated because he's been absent. So a lot like Ringo, I've got Mark Williams there as my Fab Four. And the single, I think help. I need somebody help, not just anybody help, I think is going to be the single here for the Charlotte Hornets because they need some help.
George Harrison, my mom's favorite Beatle. Little known fact. They share a birthday.
It's a very little known fact. Your mother's favorite
only
birthday.
4 people know that.
For You Blue, one of my favorite Beatles songs, was a Harrison number.
There you go.
Okay, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Hornets.
We did it.
I think we did it. Thank you for all the great. That's what I love. The weird Satchel questions. I love the avenues that it takes you down are going to be very different avenues than your normal Hornets questions. Thanks so much for listening to us, making us your first listen. Check out Locked On Sports Today live on YouTube. Check us out next week. Walker will be back, and we will be back to our regular rotation. Until then, thank you, David, for filling in. You did a wonderful job. Thanks to Nada, who we will reconnect with next week on the NBA draft. Until next time, go Hornets, go America. Let's swarm. Sure.